Here's Matt Powell to give 10 proofs of God's existence.
There's 10 reasons why God exists, and we're going to just run through these real fast for sake of time. Number 1, the order and design of the cosmos points to an intelligent mind.
No, it doesn't. This inference is based on the assumption that order can only exist if it is deliberately imposed by a conscious mind. Folks who make this argument just assume that if the universe existed without a God, everything would be random all the time. There is no reason to make this assumption.
You do not get matter and energy from nothing.
And there never was nothing. Matter comes from energy, and there was never a time when energy didn't exist. It didn't come from nothing because it didn't come from anywhere. There was never a time when it wasn't already in existence.
If I said that a rock just appeared in this room from nowhere, would anybody believe me?
No, because that would be a change that we would expect to have a cause. First, the room existed without the rock, then the rock appeared. A change occurred, so it makes sense to ask what caused that change. However, the same cannot be said about the universe. Since the universe is the space-time continuum, there, by definition, was never a time when the universe did not exist. There was no change from a state of affairs in which the universe did not exist to a state of affairs in which the universe did exist. The universe has existed for all of the 13.7 billion years that time seems to have existed, and it makes no sense to speak of a state of affairs before time.
But imagine if the entire universe just poofed into existence from nothing with no God.
There never was nothing. The universe didn't poof into existence because there was never a time when it wasn't already in existence.
That is magic. If you're an atheist, you're believing in mysticism.
Maybe I would be if your straw men were true.
And magic, you cannot get something from nothing.
Which is why God could not have created the universe from nothing.
And order and design means that there is a designer.
There is no reason to infer that order requires a designer, and by calling anything design, you're already assuming a designer, not giving evidence for one.
Number 2, because everything that begins to exist has a cause.
That's not true of the space-time continuum. You can't cause something to exist at a time when it already exists, and there was never a time when the space-time continuum didn't already exist. If you infer that everything that hasn't existed for an infinite amount of time needs a cause, then God needs a cause too, because he hasn't existed for an infinite amount of time, because there hasn't been an infinite amount of time for which he could have existed.
The universe began to exist at one point, at some point in the past, whether it was through the Big Bang or through God speaking it into existence. The universe began to exist. Do things just begin to exist on their own?
When did God speak the universe into existence? Since the universe is the space-time continuum, there couldn't have been time before the universe, so he couldn't have done it then. And because you can't bring something into existence at a time when it already exists, he couldn't have done it at the very first moment of time either.
No, you would have to have something outside of matter and energy, bringing into existence matter and energy. Number 3, the anthropic principle. Life is balanced on a razor's edge, folks. If we were a little bit closer to the sun, we would burn up. If we were a little bit farther from the sun, we would freeze to death. If the moon wasn't in just a specific position, we would be drowned by the waves that the moon actually causes, the tides.
So your all-powerful God doesn't have the power to keep us alive without fiddling around with the exact positions of the Earth and Moon?
Number 4, the amount of information in a single cell is so densely packed that it demands an intelligent mind.
Why? Why does the density of information require an intelligence? Information is just non-randomness. Since, as I said before, non-randomness does not require intelligence, why does dense non-randomness require intelligence?
You cannot get information from nothingness. That is foolishness.
No, but you can get it from unintelligent sources. If a rock falls into some mud, the shape of the indentation that it makes will be information about the shape of the rock. That's not nothingness, but it also does not involve any intelligence.
Number 5, life comes from life. To me, it's much more plausible to believe and assert that life came into existence from a creator rather than life coming into existence from a rock.
What do you think life is? If life only comes from life, then does that mean that God is a life form? Biologically, life is self-replicating nucleotide chains. Is God made of self-replicating nucleotide chains?
Humans have an innate drive for meaning in life. I believe every single person in this room is seeking meaning in life.
How is that proof of the existence of a meaninglessly self-contradictory concept like God?
Let me tell you something. If we are seeking meaning in life, that means we were designed by a God who created us with a purpose.
How does that follow? Seeking meaning just means that we're trying to find something to do with ourselves that is of some positive consequence. Why would we need to be designed by a God in order to do that? Why is that not behavior that evolution can produce?
And if atheism is true, and there is no God, there's no meaning in life.
There's no externally imposed purpose, but that doesn't mean there's no meaning. There's meaning as long as you can find something to do that has consequences that you value.
And a lot of atheists tell me, I make up my own meaning. That's make-believe. They're living in a make-believe world.
I don't make up my own meaning. I don't make up my values. They are the product of my upbringing and the evolution of my brain.
You don't make up your own meaning. You are assigned meaning by the ultimate purpose giver, God himself.
That sounds pretty miserable.
Number 7, moral absolutes demand that there is a moral lawgiver. If there is no God, how do you tell right from wrong?
Even if there is a God, I don't believe there is any absolute right from wrong, because there is no absolute non-circular reason why we ought to do what God says.
It's all subjective. It's all based on feelings. A lot of people will tell me it depends on what our society decides. Well, in Adolf Hitler's society, it was right to kill Jews, but is it right to do that? No, not at all.
My conscience tells me that it's also not right to unalive Canaanites and Amalekites, but God apparently has a different view. Matt is appealing to our abhorrence of anti-Semitism to paint subjective morality as bad, but my subjective emotions are just as hostile to the unaliving of Canaanites and Amalekites as they are to the unaliving of Jews.
There is no morality to that. That is evil. If there is no God, there's no such thing as evil.
There's still such a thing as actions that are intolerable to my conscience. There are actions that I cannot tolerate regardless of whether there is a God to say they are evil or not.
And think about this too, and I know we got to wrap up, but if there is no God and evil things happen, how would everything ever be made right?
I don't aim to make things right according to some God's standard of what constitutes right. I aim to make things more tolerable to my conscience.
The problem of evil is not for Christianity, it's for atheists. Christianity offers a solution that every single wrong that has ever happened in this world will be made right someday.
It offers a fake solution.
Number 8, we experience love. And let me say this, there is more to love than a biochemical reaction. And if you're married this morning, or if you have children this morning, or if you have a mom or a dad this morning, you probably know this, that there's more to love than just chemicals. According to Darwinists, we're nothing but chemicals. But according to the Bible, we were designed with a purpose, and we were designed with the ability to love.
What exactly is the argument here? We're more than chemicals because the Bible says so?
If we were just biological machines that are coded with just nothing but genetic material, how is it that we have the ability to love one another to the point of laying down our lives for each other?
Because evolution produces net advantages for survival, not absolute advantages. Evolution gave our brains a capacity for empathy because it gives us a greater survival advantage than disadvantage, not because it's perfectly advantageous.
How is that possible if we're nothing but robots? Do robots give their lives for each other?
The ones built by evolution do, because empathy still produces greater advantages for survival and reproduction than disadvantages.
Number 9, free will. Darwinists believe that there is no such thing as free will. You can go to your university, you can ask them, and they will say there's no free will. We are programmed by genetic processes through natural selection, and we cannot make choices ultimately. We are just robots.
There are plenty of people who believe in both evolution and free will. I don't think free will exists because there doesn't seem to be anything going on in the brain that isn't causally determined. But that has nothing to do with evolution because there are some physical processes that are not purely determined. Evolution could have produced a brain in which things spontaneously happen rather than being causally determined. I just don't see any evidence that it did. Since that's the case, I don't see why free will, if it did exist, requires a God.
That is not true. Everybody in here knows that we were designed with a free will, that you have the ability to make choices.
The fact that the choices I make are predetermined doesn't mean that I don't make them.
And if you have that ability to choose between right and wrong, that means that there is a right and wrong moral lawgiver.
Yeah, my conscience.
And not only that, that also means that you were designed by somebody that gave you the ability to make those choices.
How does that follow? Why can't evolution produce that ability?
Number 10, the human drive for life after death. This is evidence for God's existence. We were designed with a desire to obtain life after death.
The fact that we desire something is proof that it exists?
To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.